Hello and welcome. Tonight's stream is one that I didn't actually think we'd ever really need to do, but across the internet, you've heard these cries about free speech and cancel culture and all these misunderstandings of what these concepts actually are and mean. And to go even further, there are people who say that, these far-right parties like neo-Nazis deserve to be on platforms and have their right to say whatever they want. And what we're going to be discussing is, are these concepts maybe being abused slightly? Is free speech supposed to be an absolute? Should everybody have the right to any platform that they were? Does deplatforming work? All of these things and more will be discussed tonight, so hopefully you'll join us on the SciPh show. So hello, and welcome to the SciPh show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
I'm Martijn.
I'm Andy. And I'm Vigdis.
And Vigdis, this is your first time here. We've spent a lot of time chatting over Twitter, but not many of our viewers are going to know who you are. So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself before we start the stream?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm pretty much mostly Twitter shitposter, but I have a that's my main thing. But I also do a bit of gameplay. I have a YouTube channel. There's like 5 videos, 3 of which are private. I am an anarchist, anarcho-socialist, and I have a bit of a background in philosophy too. I spent 2 years in uni. I quit after I fell into depression, but
Oh, no.
yeah.
Was it the philosophy that did that to you?
No, the not being able to really write how you're supposed to write in uni did that to me. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is about me. I like philosophy. I like sociology mostly, and I'm French too. That's probably the worst part about me. Yeah. I know no one likes the French.
I don't mind them.
They're easy to rip on, though, aren't they?
True.
No, awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. It was kind of funny. I mean, have you seen some of these conversations that I briefly mentioned at the start coming about recently? Vigdis.
So yeah, sorry. I shared that on Twitter, but one guy on Reddit. Well, that's just one recent example, but one guy on Reddit told me I was a fascist because I didn't want fascists to have a platform. For example. I told him during the Spanish Civil War he would have been a Frankist and Orwell would have shot him in the face. But besides that, I don't think it's a new conversation actually. Back in like 2016, in the skeptic community, it was a big talking point that if we didn't allow free speech for far right figures, that would mean we were the true Nazis. But yeah, I shared a video with you in DMs about that a while ago. But yeah, that's not an old recent conversation.
No, it is one of those things that comes circling around. And I mean, I know that there's even like the ACLU in America that have fought for the right for sort of like Nazi protests and things like that, people's right to say things. They did the same for like Westboro Baptist Church and stuff like that. I've only sort of skimmed that. I'm not completely well versed with them, but I just remember reading it and going, "Oh wow, really?" But I think perhaps, just perhaps, we should wind things back and actually discuss the very basics of what we mean by the concepts that we are going to be discussing tonight. So, Martijn, could you give us a working definition of free speech?
Yeah, sure. Basically, free speech is just a protection against the government restricting your speech or punishing you for your speech. That's basically it.
So, in that regard, it is literally just if you say something, the government can't arrest you for it.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
And is this an absolute? Is it free to say absolutely anything?
Free from the government, yeah.
Free from the government. So I was reading that.
Wait, sorry. That does preclude some things, like state secrets, for instance, libel, slander, those kinds of things. The instances where speech actually does harm in
Yes.
some tangible and legislated way. That's very important. There has to be a law for it.
So there's also the form of harm where it's actually something that can incite immediate danger as well, isn't there? Like it's one of those ones that's kind of hard to prove. But if you are doing something that would say incite a riot that would cause a lot of harm to the town, destruction of property, obviously people getting hurt, I don't know if it's the same in every country, but when I was reading up on American free speech, which is often the main citation of it, there is this clause in there that you shouldn't be able to make those calls. Sort of, you shouldn't be able to say things that are gonna a call to action. Let's kill everybody in this state right here, sort of thing, and it actually be an inciting thing, not just saying it like, "Ah, fuck it, I hate everyone, I'm gonna kill everyone," but a genuine provable. And that's the bit that makes it hard, because how do you prove that they're not just saying stuff? And that's where that sort of get out clause is. But is that the same understanding as free speech? I know you mentioned like libel and slander, but is free speech around the world, or at least to your knowledge, similar? You shouldn't be able to have these calls to action.
Where you do have free speech, it seems to be fairly similar. Though we should also always be careful with these kinds of things, because they may be done in very different ways in different countries, right? So, for instance, I know that there's countries out there who put freedom of religion under freedom of speech because it's a compendium of freedom of expression, right?
Mm-hmm.
But other countries, like my own country, insist on having specific legislation for freedom of religion because they value that freedom above normal expression for some reason.
So is this sort of free speech what you experience in the Netherlands?
What do you mean exactly?
So the limitations that you have on free speech, and like I mentioned, with the incitement to, you can't incite people and to cause violence, etc. Is it the same in the Netherlands as that, or is is it more restrictive? Is it less restrictive?
That's Hard to say, really. In some cases, it's a bit more restricted. No, well, yeah, no, I think it's hard to say, really. It's hard to compare because one thing that does come to mind is we did have a politician stand trial for utterances he made during a what is it during a rally, right? He specifically asked his audience, like, do you want more or less people from Morocco in this area? And he had arranged that's a funny detail. He had arranged for them to to chant less, 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 and then he said, well, we're gonna do that, and did end up going to trial for that and being convicted, but that weird one where you don't actually get punished,
Mm.
right? So that's what makes it a bit difficult.
I'm reading on something like the law in the Netherlands, Article 137C. He who in public, either verbally or in writing or image, directly offends a group of people because of their race, etc., shall be punished with imprisonment not exceeding 1 year or a fine of the third category. So it's not just inciting hatred; it's offending a group too, apparently.
Okay, so from that, it's actually if you're publicly out speaking, so almost it inciting hate crime, because there isn't in at least in American law, there isn't a law against hate speech. The only way that hate speech could be restricted is if it is also a call to action combined with the hate speech. So is that the same as what you're saying there? You know, it's not just so you can be targeting, but it's got to be, as you say, in a protest or something like that. Again, a call to action.
I don't think so, but I think Martin can confirm that or not. I sent the link to the specific text in the Discord live chat.
Yeah, no, you were absolutely right. That's exactly what happened. The thing is, and that's fairly typical for a democracy, really, is that his big mistake was doing this outside of Parliament, because inside of Parliament he does have you know the ultimate free speech.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever he says, nothing can be done about it. He could even stand there and call for the assassination for someone that might only get him kicked out of the Parliament, for as far as I'm aware. But the thing here was not the call to action; it was the offending of a big group, as I recall,
Mm-hmm.
and that I do believe that does not require a call to action.
Interesting. Okay. So what I was looking at within America, obviously, again, was that wouldn't necessarily be enough. It does need that sort of incitement. So I guess in some respects that there is a little bit more leeway, a little bit more freedom in the free speech, if you want to call it that, in somewhere like America, than but perhaps Europe has had a little bit more experience with
Fewer guns.
yeah.
Yeah. Holocaust denial laws are much more prevalent here in Europe, I think.
Yeah. Is free speech much the same in France?
I don't think so. I would have to read about it quickly. I found the specific article for the Netherlands laws because I was reading on the legality of Holocaust denial. But in France, we have the Guesso Act, which it literally forbids denying the existence of the Holocaust. I think the Armenian genocide and the Holodomor fall under the same act. The Holodomor was a how do I say it? It was officially declared as a genocide. So I think it falls under it too, and denying that is explicitly forbidden. A few politicians have been in trouble because of that too.
Yeah.
I
That's fair. I
thought,
mean,
yeah.
like if you want to take like a brief second, or do you know what, we can come to it another time, and just verify that, then that's cool. But it seems like
I,
there's
I
obviously certain things that you know are not free to say in front. So there's a few restrictions on types of things that you can't say, things that you would be surprised even needed legislation, but the fact is that there are people that deny the Holocaust, which
yeah, we have Jean-Marie Le Pen, which did that. This guy is a monster. He founded the biggest far-right party here with former SS, no less. So yeah, not a good guy.
yeah, fair.
I'll check up on the legal code quickly.
That's cool. So Dave and Andy, obviously we're all in the UK, and I've never really thought that hard about free speech myself, because it's always seemed to be a bit of a given of what it is. So I, other than when we've done streams in the past, I have never had to think too deeply about it. But Dave, what's your understanding of free speech in the UK?
We don't actually have the right to free speech in the UK. Okay, apparently I've killed Andy. Hit my button and Andy drops off because that's the way my computer works.
I don't know what happened there. All of a sudden, it just said, "Oh, you've been kicked off." I was like, "Well, okay, then fine."
Oh, maybe you actually did, Dave.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It's the kind of thing that happens when I touch a computer. Yeah, in the UK, we don't actually have free speech laws beyond the European human rights. We can criticize the government because we basically live in that kind of country and we're free to criticize the government, but we don't actually have protections beyond the Human Rights Commission for doing so. In the UK, we do actually have some laws, like if you target a person online, we have the recent trolling laws. You could be fined for that and even imprisoned if you carry on. Things like drill music is banned in the UK, or specific artists and things like that. We don't actually have the kind of free speech that many people think we do in the UK.
I suppose that's because it always seems so generally free that like the things that are banned tend to be quite extreme.
Yeah, we're a functioning democracy, even though we have monarchy and we have like a theocratic style government where we have a church that has control and power in the government. But we're a functioning democracy. But if you look to the actual coronation at the weekend, there was a bunch of people arrested because they were going to protest the coronation.
I was going to bring that up. I was waiting for a point to bring up Luke's comment, and I remember seeing this as well. And when you mentioned monarchy there, it was like, there's an in. Nice segue. But yes, as Luke said in the chat, free speech is freedom from arrest, from speaking against the government, just like the processors who get arrested for protesting a monarch during his coronation. So this is something that I do wonder, because technically monarchy, I mean our monarchy is a working monarchy. They're paid royals essentially, so you could regard them as part of the government, but
they're leeches on the tax system.
they also bring in money through like revenue,
So
through
are you, Dave.
And then
tourism
take it all
that.
again.
Yeah, I know. I'm
the monarchy.
I'm trying to be balanced, you know.
Fuck the royals.
Sean did a video on that if you want to check it out sometimes. It's
Is
really
that
good.
Who is that? Sorry.
Sean, the YouTuber, made a video on the monarchy. It's quite good. A bit old, but it's very good. You should check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the recommendation.
I'll send it later.
So with these people that actually got arrested for protesting or going to protest the monarch during his coronation, under our laws, should this have actually happened?
Like I said, we don't actually have laws in place to protect that kind of thing. We only have the human rights laws that basically go on, and I suppose they weren't really protesting the government as such or criticizing the government. They were just disrupting a ceremony.
Yeah. I know there are certain laws against what you can say towards a monarch as well, at least in the UK. I was reading up on it, and I've basically forgotten every single thing I read.
Relatable.
Yeah. But it obviously threats against the monarchy can be taken as treason, but there's even things that could lead to there being a harm type thing. So like that protest against the monarch could be taken as something that would then incite something that could harm the monarch. And it's a slippery slope at the end of the day, but I suppose a protest could have incited something like that. People for and against the monarch could have ended up fighting each other.
Well, they did have the guy throw shotgun shells over the wall just before the weekend, I think it was, and stuff like that. So I suppose there is that. But the protests were actually arranged beforehand, everything done according to the UK laws for protesting. Everything was arranged. The police were informed when it was going to happen. And then the police used that information to swoop in and arrest them all.
Fair. Doesn't seem necessarily like a just arrest unless there was that genuine threat.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, what's your take on it, Andy?
I'm very indifferent about it, if I was to be honest. The actual protests themselves, they can. I mean, freedom of speech is different to freedom to do an action against someone. So the protest was actually it was actually an action as opposed to just them talking about it. So I think there's a bit of a distinction there. But I mean, if they were well within their rights to do it, then I don't see why they weren't allowed. But I get that there is that threat, and they could, and the police will say, yeah, okay, there was definitely a threat, so we have to sort of arrest them just to get them out of the way, and they'll probably just be let off with no charge, and that's it's again, I really, for that part, I don't know. The I'm not much of a monarchist, if I was to be honest. But then again, I don't hate them either. I just think I'm really indifferent about the whole thing. So not much input my end.
Fair enough.
They do bring a couple of advantages, such that they would stop any fascist party from actually really taking over if any got in power. But I'm not.
How would they stop it though?
The Queen has to sign off on stuff. Like ultimately,
there's a king now, so
isn't that just a bit of a checkbox thing? And she doesn't actually.
It's a checkbox and ceremonial, but in the end, it could be enforced and could stop something like fascists from properly taking control.
What happens if the king becomes a fascist?
What do you mean becomes? But yeah, no, that would be a chink in that armor, so to speak.
It seems like, certain things like this are quite a complicated issue. So, as you say, like in the UK, we don't necessarily have free speech in the way that it is elsewhere. it seems like in Europe, at least for in France and the Netherlands, and I imagine other places around Europe too, there is more free speech, though certain things are restricted. But there is a slightly more open version of free speech in the United States, where obviously, unless you're inciting some call to action, you're generally free to say what you like. But as you pointed out earlier, Martijn, and Luke has pointed out, if all speech is free, how can we arrest people for fraud, libel, slander, perjury, etc.? Speech has to be limited. Pretending it has no real consequences because it's just speech is naive as hell. And I think this is a key point. Nothing is just speech. I mean, a general conversation between friends, but when you're speaking publicly about a lot of issues, your words, especially if you're someone who has quite a public voice, you're in the public eye, whether you're in some form of parliament or you're a movie star or something like that, you become face of the company, you become a face of the country. Your words can affect people into doing and acting in certain ways. And without some limitation on speech, things, again, we go down the slippery slope, but the slippery slope isn't a fallacious one. We know that this sort of stuff happens. Now, an example that keeps coming up is people have started calling this cancel culture. So if I just
Sorry.
if I just go,
I was nearly cancelled earlier. I went, didn't I?
we tried, Andy.
I'm a victim. I know. I don't blame you, to be honest.
But Andy, what's your understanding of cancel culture?
It's is it just? I mean, I whatever. It's just what someone calls deplatforming people, and just because of they said something, and it's just I don't really understand it, if I was to be honest. So maybe you guys can enlighten me. If someone gets cancelled, and they then go on to say I've been cancelled, have they really been cancelled?
Well,
it's
there's a few examples that I would actually like to bring up about this. Some of them about, I can't remember her name now. Typically, that lady on Star Wars that came out with, as in The Mandalorian, that said a few things. But I will address that in a minute.
Gianna Garofalo or
Yes,
something.
something like that. Yeah, and I will address a few things like that. But just want to make sure that we've all got
Can I
at
add
least.
something?
I was just going to say, I was going to ask you next. So, Victus, what's your understanding of what cancel culture is supposed to be? Perhaps is a way we should say it. Not what people see it as, but what is it supposed to be?
Well, I don't think cancel culture is very supposed to be anything, actually. I think in the term, I don't really know when the term came out, but from what I understand and how people use it, all I see it used as is just people complaining they've been cancelled by the quote unquote mainstream media and they're not allowed to speak publicly. But like, I remember like 2 years ago, there was a cancel con, like, I think it was Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager, and a few other like that who just came together to complain they were being cancelled, and they were doing that on YouTube. So I don't think cancel culture really means anything.
And
It's
their
just
words had
popular.
impact, and now lots of people are saying the same thing.
Yeah, actually, we could talk about stochastic terrorism later on.
Yes.
But,
I
yeah.
can't tell if cancel culture is supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, it's supposed to be a bad thing because it's woke.
It's woke, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Dave,
Is woke a good or a bad thing?
depends who you're
Well,
asking.
it's bad. But if you ask me, it's good.
Isn't it just being
A good
nice?
person.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
being a nice person, like
not being completely
understanding it
selfish and trying
and
to understand
empathetic
others.
and
And exactly. Yeah, that's
You're not
their
being an
purpose.
American.
But
Yeah.
according to them, it means you're controlled by them. Them obviously being the Jews.
Left-wing intellectuals.
Yeah, basically
Jews.
the opposite of a
Judeo
really
Bolshevism.
selfish libertarian. That's what woke
Or
is.
just
being the opposite.
theocratic fascist.
Dave, we had a brief chat about cancel culture the other day, and you actually raised some points around capitalism and cancel culture. Could you tell us a bit about that now?
Yeah. Okay. One of the arguments for capitalism is that it's a good enforcer of morality. In other words, people can choose to spend their money on those things that are good. And that determines what is right and wrong within a country,
I
or
can
within
see
a capitalist country.
Martin winding up on this at this point. But go on, sorry.
he just hates
That's
everything
the whole idea.
capitalism.
That's one of the whole
You're lucky
ideas
you
of
can see me.
capitalism. Yeah. I don't think
it's
it's right.
fundamentally wrong. Capitalism is basically social Darwinism with money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's one of the arguments that is put forward by capitalists, that being able to choose where to spend our money is what can create right and wrong and moral standards within any kind of capitalist structure. But yet, generally, whenever somebody chooses not to spend their money on particular things, or chooses to spend their money on particular things to support that, you'll always find the right-wing side arguing that that's not what we're supposed to be spending our money on, or not what we're supposed to be refusing to spend our money on. And hence the term cancel culture. Cancel culture is just a propagandist term.
Yeah, that's about what I said. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Martin, would you like to follow that? Because you still seem a little bit agitated.
Well, no,
capitalism.
I'm just agitated by the harebrained ass fucking argument that is. I mean,
oh yeah, I
mean,
agree.
on their way to collect social security check. Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately, cancel culture can be seen from the fact as a work of capitalism. Yeah, the fact that you can choose not to go with products or companies or watch things that you disagree with on moral grounding, and enough people disagree with it on moral grounding, then that company happens to go under, and therefore they're being cancelled. So, it's sorry, go for it.
I don't really like that argument though, because to take a popular example again, PragerU. No one likes PragerU online. Let's not lie about it. But they still exist. The only reason is because they're funded by the Koch brother. Well, brother singular now, because one's dead. But I don't think it's really what we put money in, because the right wing has the backing of billionaires, because their interests align at least a little bit, until the fascists take over and they try to take the money for themselves. But I don't think it's us who decide really who is cancelled or not. Also, that reminded me of the right wing saying, go woke, go broke. But
basically think of other people before yourself, and you'll go broke, because the people that don't think of anyone other than themselves,
and
are gonna
especially because it's again a capitalism thing, because Disney went woke because they knew they'd get more money by doing that, instead of pandering to the right wing. So they went broke. They went woke, but never broke.
So, I mean, to carry on this idea of cancel culture, as I mentioned, I've already forgotten her name again, but
Jan Garofalo or something like that.
Gina, was it?
Gina something. I'll have a
Yeah,
look now.
yeah. But absolutely wicked character. Thought she was a total badass in The Mandalorian, and
She was great in the film Haywire or something like that.
I've not seen that either. But
Yeah, brilliant film.
you know, the opinions about other things aside, she seemed to be a pretty good actor. But when you're an actor, you're essentially the face of the company, and she said some things that. Sorry, Dave.
Gina Carano.
Ah, there you go. That sounds roughly familiar. I say because he's
I
already
just
said it.
remember Gianna Garofalo is the comedian.
But she said some things that basically Disney didn't agree with, and the morals that they align with in their company. She becomes a face of the company. She's saying it publicly. She has influence. That does sort of entail back to the company. People link it. Well, if you let those sort of people work there, then actually maybe we won't watch you. Maybe, like we were talking about, you'll lose the viewership because they're allowing someone to say these statements. So she then complained of being cancelled. But if I was to say things that were not in accordance to my companies that I work for ethos, I would get fired. If I lied on my CV, I would get fired. If I was found out, that is, obviously. There's plenty of things that actually, within the business world, that you sign a contract and you're not allowed to say or do certain things. In fact, even if there's no hate speech laws necessarily in your country, your company might say that we are up for inclusion and diversity. So if you say anything against that, you will at the very least get in a lot of trouble and possibly lose your job. So, did she get cancelled or did she just basically break her contract?
She's not been cancelled because she now works for Ben Shapiro.
I
Which is the equivalent to being cancelled, but you know.
I mean, at the same time, fuck the company though. I mean,
just because you don't like Disney, man.
no, not just because I don't like Disney. In the story that you've just told us, do you not notice the power difference here? In the sense that Disney retains the rights to be far more powerful over its employees than their employees are in the whole business relationship.
I
Just
mean,
not paying attention to what was said because, to be honest, I don't know. But yeah,
I mean, Disney in general does have a hell of a lot of control over its companies. There are some absolute horror stories that come out of people who work in the Disney parks and things like that.
Nationalized Disney.
But that aside, it's still just an example of the same sort of thing could happen to me in my company. I could say similar things.
and that's a problem too.
But is it really? If you're trying to
Yes.
work for a better society and you've got strong ethical grounds in your company, people are, my company's working for, a lot of inclusion and diversity and trying to understand everybody, and someone makes some really ignorant and bigoted comments and they persist down this line of thinking and don't actually take the time to learn and understand things and see things from other people's point of view, and they continue being hateful. Should they really be working there? Would you want to work in a company where there was someone who is absolutely repugnant?
From the story, from what I've gathered thus far, this person hasn't uttered it on the work floor, right?
No, they did it publicly on Twitter, I believe it was.
Right, but publicly not at your job should not be in the power of your employer.
I sent an article on the live chat of Discord about what she said.
Oh,
We
shit, I can't manage Discord. I'm gonna try to find it.
we'll have a
Wasn't
quick.
it to do with transgenderism?
Among other things, yeah, but she
There were
compared
transphobic
being
comments and stuff like that in
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
she compared being conservative to being Jewish in Nazi
Jewish,
Yes.
Germany.
yeah, that's it.
Yes, she basically
Oh,
compared
that's-
being Republican to being Jewish in the Holocaust, and
I
that
mean,
was
that's
that was
unfortunate.
yes. So I mean, it's
No
I can-
wonder she went with the lady wire.
yeah. You can understand that perhaps she was trying to be, you know, dramatic and give some power to her words and actually say, look, you know, this is how I feel. But I mean, really, really poor choice. Like, really, really poor choice. Basically saying that if
Of
you're not
any
going to let me.
comparison- Of
Sorry?
any comparison that you could
Yeah.
make, don't compare yourself to being a Jew in the Holocaust.
That's
That's like
go-to, though.
that's like
That's
the
the
worst.
first thing they go to. If you watch any conservative media online, that they pretty much like it to compare themselves to Jews in the Holocaust because that's the first thing they can think of, basically. Because
A
they
bunch
have
of them
no
started
imagination.
wearing. A bunch of them have started wearing yellow stars to protests and things like that.
Yeah, doing the vaccine mandates. Yeah,
It's crazy.
I remember that.
So I mean, if you want to oversimplify it, because she wasn't allowed to say transphobic comments and the like, she compared it to being a Jew in the Holocaust. Right.
Again, unfortunate, but I still do think that in this story, the power difference is far too much favoring the employer. Not defending anything she said because it's abhorrent. Yeah, we can fucking abhorrent, but there is something to be said here for the fact that if your employer gets to do that, then why wouldn't they get to do it with a smaller political difference? And why can't we then inch towards being completely intolerant of everybody's political views unless they align with whatever the company pretends to think today? Because that's another thing. The moral compass of especially Disney is about as reliable as a clock spinning 1,000 miles an hour. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but I think it's more a capitalism problem than a free speech one, though. But yeah, I agree. Obviously, but I'm not sure that's really the topic of discussion.
No, but it's a very interesting one. I liked the
Yeah.
discussions on power
Well,
and stuff like that in the past.
It's
And
an instance where the two intersect,
Mhm.
and I do think that if you're gonna do the subject some justice, we're gonna need to do some of this anyway. But we can move on. Sure.
Yeah. Although, yeah, the thing you described is pretty much the, let's say, Tumblr part of the left wing, the left side of the political aisle. But yeah, mm, purity testing is what it's called. Is pretty frequent online. It's less frequent on the right, so but that's another discussion, I think.
I think
The right needs all the allies it can get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, I think I tend to agree that the fact is she's basically broken a clause in her contract. I understand what you're saying though, Martin, with there is perhaps, you know, a power balance, and how do you control within the company where exactly the line is. And you do have a point, although I think my experience with companies is they try to be as open as possible, at least in the UK at the moment. They try to be kind, understanding, inclusive, whether that's for bullshit reasons or not. that doesn't really matter in this instance, because at the end of the day, the way society is moving is in such a way that businesses have to move that way. Otherwise, there are going to be problems. And I do think it's better that when people might say extreme things like that, that a company does sort of toe a line. But you're right. I mean, if someone was just saying something like, and it's a completely wrong statement, but yeah, Brexit's a good idea, you wouldn't necessarily want your company to like fire you for that. But again, that's not quite the same sort of thing, is it?
No, it's not. Of course not. But these things, especially in a legal sense, do have. Well, when you have a loophole, companies tend to go through it, but widen it wherever they can, right? So at a certain point, you're going to stretch that loophole too far, and that's basically the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we can again say it's a slippery slope, but it's not necessarily a fallacious one, because it is something that can and does happen where there are loopholes. Businesses and governments will do everything they can to, as you say, widen them and find ways to justify things that perhaps we wouldn't have otherwise agreed with. But there are other examples of people who say that they're being cancelled, and they're being cancelled perhaps because people don't agree with what they say, so they stop watching them, and that's why they say they're being cancelled. Or they say some things that are hateful, and they're on sites, and they get reported for saying these abhorrent things. So if you're saying something like that on, say, I don't know, Twitter or YouTube or any kind of social media, they do have limitations over what you're allowed to say. You're not supposed to be able to say things that are harassing and bullying and, inciting violence and so on and so forth. So if they come out and say these things and they get reported for saying them and they're found in violation of community guidelines and they do it again and again and they get their account removed, are they really being cancelled, or did they just not stick to the terms and conditions that they were supposed to adhere to, and like every single one of us never actually read when they pressed OK to sign
Scroll
up to
to
the
the
site?
bottom, click agree. Yeah, that's the one.
Well, I've seen recently that YouTube is very, but very lenient with right-wing propaganda. Like, only very recently did Matt Walsh's channel get demonetized, not banned, demonetized for all the aberrant shit he says. But
You're very right there, actually. Dave and I did a bit of a stream about the YouTube algorithm and things like that, and Dave had a similar observation about how there was a lot of right-wing stuff, and basically because it generated a hell of a lot of money for Google, they were a bit more lenient with the content because it's making them money. And
yeah, that's actually a problem though, because I follow a lot of leftist streamers, and some of them actually did get banned because they showed their content on the right-wing channels on their channels.
So they actually addressed clips from the right-wing channels and they got banned, but the original content was still up and running.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Well,
not in a good way.
No, but I think a lot of what that is it would be the people who follow that right-wing content see this, response pop up, and then they report it, report, and then you get a lot of mass reporting, and the algorithm and people who work at Google or whatever don't necessarily care.
It's probably just because the response doesn't get as much money.
Yes, but when you've got those reports of it, and as you say, the response isn't getting as much money as the original, they're like, oh yeah, well that's clearly bad, we'll get rid of it. And again, this is the problem with money having a stake in the power. It's not purely about the ethics of what's being said and the actual content. It's being driven by, yeah, you shouldn't say this stuff, but if it earns us enough money, we can say it. Yeah. And that,
Free speech is always about money.
yeah.
Those who have the most money have the most speech.
Yeah, just look at Twitter. You now have to pay to have free speech on Twitter.
Freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach, as he says.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say what you want, but nobody can hear you. So I'm just going to address a couple of things from the chat because I have got a little bit behind with it. Luke says there's a difference between having a publicly held political opinion and making statement which cause controversy to the point of national news and draws attention to the company. And I think that's a good point as well. You know, she's not just having, she's not just being a right winger. This is obviously going back to Gina. It's not just being a right winger. It's not just saying this is my political beliefs. This is what I stand for. It's not just saying some hateful things. It's the whole package and the fact that it made national news, and it sort of would have to force the company's hand, because the other side of that is a lot more of a negative effect back to the company. And back, as you say, Dave, it's about the money at the end of the day. They probably would have lost more money if they just not done anything yet, because the inaction would basically be supporting the comments that were made. And that's something that we'll actually come to later when we start addressing Nazism and the neo-Nazis and stuff like that.
Yeah, as a counterexample, Tom Cruise is a Scientologist, but he never really got cancelled for that.
No, yeah, I don't think he's ever been cancelled for any of that, and even some of the stuff that he says is a little bit weird.
Also, Jared Leto is a literal fucking cult leader and sex offender, and everybody's fine, including Disney. So again, it's really arbitrary, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the way Disney appears in the public eye, really.
Yeah, as long as the people working at Disney are not making the company look bad, Disney is fine with whatever they're doing.
Yeah, I suppose it can be one of those. It, like I said earlier, it's a tough line, and as Dave mentioned as well, there's always money involved in this, so it's not a simple answer as much as we'd like it to be. We can say what it ought to be, but Luke also says, I love that right wingers hate capitalism being used against them. and that is just it. I mean, at the end of the day, capitalism is what is somewhat influencing these decisions. You know, if businesses will lose money by not taking action and cancelling people, then, you know, it's due to capitalism or their fear of what capitalism might bring them. Yeah. As Dave says, we rigged the game and we're still losing. So yes, just to say as well, hello Claire, nice to see you here. It's absolutely fantastic to see you again. It's been a very long while. Only a couple of brief hellos on Twitter in ages. Hopefully we get a chance to stream together again soon. So cancel culture, we could sum it up, is essentially a bit of a whinge on people basically going, but people don't like it when I say things that I want to say, and they've stopped listening to me.
I'm not allowed to be racist anymore, boo.
I'm a public bigot, and now no one will talk to me. So we can see that there are at least some sort of positive effects as well. The fact that capitalism is basically making it so that there are corporations and things like that that are having to make what we would regard as ethical decisions, even if they're not done for ethical reasons, they're done for financial ones. It would seem that society in itself is changing enough, or at least moving in the right direction, to make these businesses have to make these decisions. Would you agree that this is at least somewhat of a positive, even if the financial side is still a negative? The fact that it's happening and things are moving in a more open and accepting way, and trying to reduce hate is a positive.
It's like morally right, but for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. I mean, would you say that it's at least a positive? Because one, it's showing society is moving in a more ethical direction, and two, it's moving that way that businesses have to follow suit.
I suppose the outcome is yes, but yeah, it's not for the right reasons, is it?
Yeah,
But I don't think it ever will be when companies are just basically backing whichever horse, whether it's the left horse or the right horse, to make the most money.
When money is a concern, I do think that it'll never necessarily be for the right reasons. But then maybe one day we move to a point where we have a better energy system. I know I often fantasize about that sort of Star Trek-esque world where there is no money. People just work in things because they want to do that job. That's something they enjoy doing. But it could help move us closer to that situation as well. The businesses may not actually be thinking along those lines, but if businesses are acting in more ethical ways, whether they're thinking ethical and the society is thinking in more ethical ways in general, it does seem that there is somewhat of a net positive, even though we're a very, very long way from a positive.
So we just force them to go work or they go broke.
Yeah.
It's a kind of reversal of the power that most corporations have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that Martin, the idea that the people and society are actually controlling the actions of a company, rather than the company controlling
Illusion of
people.
power.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, sadly, yeah.
Yeah, no. As long as companies are disproportionately rich, they're going to want to keep track of who has what, which means they're going to want to keep holding on to money. And as long as they're disproportionately rich, they will continue to bribe politicians to doing their bidding, and they will remain exceedingly rich, basically. So,
Yeah.
what's going to happen?
Yeah, Luke makes another couple of comments in the chat as well, saying like J.K. Rowling saying, "I'm cancelled whilst I still make hundreds of thousands a year on my IP." That's not cancelled, JKR. And no, it's not. I mean, her was it the game that released that actually looked pretty cool, but like people didn't
Hogwarts
play.
Legacy.
Sorry.
Hogwarts Legacy.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. That people decided not to do because to play for ethical reasons.
Boycotting does not work.
But she got a lot less for that than it was projected she would, and so she only got what was it, 84 million or something like that, which was way below projections. Yeah, only
For her, let's start a GoFundMe for her,
shall we? And Dave, you make the comment about like Ricky Gervais. I'm not allowed to say all these things I'm saying whilst hosting the Oscars. Yeah, he's not allowed back to do them anymore, is he?
I don't know. I don't pay attention to the guy. I think he's a twat.
So do I. Especially his comedy. He's the most unfunny comedian ever. The closest he comes to being funny is how terrible his philosophical takes are.
Yep.
I don't think it's bad. I can't find anything on that.
Maybe he decided to quit doing them or something like that. I remember seeing something like it. I thought he was throwing his toys out the pram at the Oscars because he'd been told he wasn't allowed that, but maybe he was just being himself. Either way,
He wasn't invited. That's the difference.
okay. Yeah.
Also, that's
there's
the Golden
cancelling,
Globes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Got cancelled. All right. Yeah, it's fair. Different thing. So, right. Cancel culture. We can see some positives to what happens with the whole cancelling thing, but generally the whole cancel culture thing, the people that moan they're being cancelled are just whining because people who don't agree with them for ethical reasons stop buying their shit or stop watching them. They're not earning as much money off of them because they've said things that people don't like and they're going elsewhere for their information. Oh dear. So would you say cancel culture or the whole cancelling is a form of censorship or not, Dave?
It depends on what you mean by censorship.
Okay, so tell us what we should mean by censorship.
Well, censorship would be something akin to the government stopping you from being able to say something, or say, I suppose, even the Gina Garofalo or whatever her name is. I can never remember her name. I'm sorry. You could say that she was being censored from saying those things in the name of Disney, but she wasn't being censored. Censorship is when you're not allowed to say something and everything about it is stripped completely away from everybody. There's very little censorship that actually goes on apart from, like, we used to get the IRA in the UK in the 80s, and what's his name? Jerry, whatever his name was.
Don't ask
Adams.
me names.
Adams.
Yeah, Jerry Adams, that's it. All of his speech was dubbed by an actor. They would say the exact same words, but they would use an actor to actually say it in case it incited. That would be censorship. That would be the government changing your speech or not allowing certain levels of speech. But there are plenty of things that are censored that people have no problems with. Like, we don't consider the idea that people should be allowed to show pedophile films on TV. I mean, that's censorship as such, but it's like, well, yeah, we all kind of agree with that one.
And I suppose,
and we don't consider that freedom of expression or freedom of speech either.
And we also TV in general. I mean, I don't know if they still do this because I haven't had terrestrial TV or anything like that for 20 years or so. But there used to be, like, there was a certain point where they were starting to allow a little bit of swearing, and then there was a little bit later on they were starting to allow a bit more violence.
Britain's always
the watershed.
The watershed, yes.
Yeah. Britain's always been kind of fine with swearing. It's just that they've kind of reduced the watershed, like you said.
It's usually
in America, since swearing is pretty much gone, so with sex, but violence is off the charts.
Yeah.
Minor swear words are allowed after like 8 o'clock, and then like anything's game after 9:30, I think.
Yeah.
I think even then some channels restrict the amount that goes on. You can't just you know, I mean, you can show Goodfellas on a channel, but on certain TV shows you can't swear a certain amount of times.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like a PG-13 rating, you're allowed, like for a movie, for example, you're allowed one swear word.
One fuck.
Yeah, but one like hard swear word. You could probably get away with a few of the softer swear words in there, but yeah, you're like one fuck or shit or something like that.
But a dinosaur eating a guy on the bog is perfectly fine for a PG film.
Yeah.
Yeah, here if you want to see swearing on TV, you just turn on the channel which monitors the parliamentary assembly. French logic is always fun.
Brilliant.
But that's true, though. There are politicians literally calling each other traitors and such in the assembly. So we like our politics.
Sounds like you're almost ready to go war with inside Parliament.
Oh, we are always on the brink of civil war over here.
So, I mean, even that would be a form of censorship, though, Dave. You know, the watershed, basically, is.
I suppose so. I mean, in the UK in the 80s, there was actually quite a lot that was cut. We had the whole video nasties ban list. Even today,
Carmageddon.
something. Sorry?
Carmageddon. Do you remember the game Carmageddon?
Yeah,
That-
all the blood was changed to green. The
Yeah.
game was banned for a while. There are still certain
There was
films that are banned.
so
in this
many
country.
games as well that would have been on
Yeah.
that list too.
Yeah.
Even stuff like Steven Seagal films was heavily censored. I mean, you think about the Bruce Lee films; they were heavily cut as well. Most of them aren't these days now. That's censorship. But Milo Yiannopoulos turning up at a university so he can proclaim Nazi propaganda and people saying, no, get the fuck off my property isn't censorship. That's just, you're not welcome here.
Yeah, so
Because he can still go off and say that in other
Elsewhere.
places that will, yeah.
So I mean, like a university, I know it's like it's public, but it's an education system. It's more sort of like privately owned. So you could say the same sort of thing for a business. If a business says, going back to the whole inclusion and diversity thing, if they say you're not allowed to say bigoted things, it's, you know, it's not censorship as such. It's just part of their ethos, and you're not supposed to say that. You're not being censored because, yeah, you can go say that outside the business, but this is what we say. Like in the same sort of thing, if in your house you expect people to, I don't know, take your shoes off, or you don't let people say bugger, whatever it is, it's your house, it's your rules. It's not really censorship because they can still do all of that stuff outside of your house. It's just the rules for the particular context. So would we say the same sort of thing with social media? If we were on Facebook and Twitter and all that, are they censoring you, or do they just say these are our rules? You can't say, you can't bully people, you can't harass people, you can't send dick pics. You know, is that censorship, or is that just actually just having some rules that the privately owned
Creating
business?
a safe environment.
Yeah. So a safe environment, privately owned business, probably good for the money for them to do that sort
They
of
want
thing.
they want ad revenue, so they want a safe environment. They want as many people to come on and use that platform as possible to bring in as much ad revenue as possible.
So again, it's not
get more
censorship.
money.
Yeah.
It's not censorship until maybe the government gets involved and says this person's account has to be deleted, or these posts need to be removed. So largely speaking, it's some form of governing body making a more sweeping statement.
Florida banning books from school libraries is censorship. A librarian refusing to stock Mein Kampf isn't really censorship.
Yeah. It's a difference between, again, a big governing body and at least a somewhat more privately owned business.
How about this for a distinction? If it's enforced through law, it's censorship. If it's enforced through people refusing you a platform, it's not particularly censorship.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that there's a problem with this whole approach, though.
Okay.
And it specifically has to do with social media.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say if you're in a crowd of people who have megaphones and you're the only person without a megaphone, can you say you really still have free speech? Because you won't be able to hear yourself and other people won't be able to hear you either. And I do think that there is some sort of a risk as long as these companies are privately owned and we respect their right to control their property in such a way that we do end up with people, well, de facto losing their freedom of speech, or at least their contribution to the social realm through their speech, basically, if they don't have access to such a megaphone in the shape of social media.
So actually what you say there is quite a good point, but again, you still have the freedom to say what you want, you just don't have the freedom to be heard. And also you could go elsewhere and say those things. So you still have that freedom of speech, but I like the analogy you give, because that's basically what Elon Musk has done with Twitter. If you don't pay $8 a month, not many people are going to, that $8 a month gives you that megaphone that you're talking about.
Freedom of reach.
Yes, freedom of reach, not freedom of speech. So I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's necessarily reducing your freedom of speech. It's just
No, it's not specifically reducing your freedom of speech. It just gives you the question whether we should expand freedom of speech from being a protection from the government to being a protection by the government. In other words, that the
Yeah.
government should perhaps protect your ability to exercise your freedom of speech.
I mean, there's a sort of sense of power in the way that Luke puts it, or say a Foucauldian sense of power, where those who can control the conversation and those who can control who gets heard have power. And I suppose there is that sense in controlling people's speech on social media, but it's a fine line, I guess.
yeah.
But an important one moving forward as we
Yeah.
keep using
I mean, a
AI
lot of people
and-
see something like Twitter or Facebook as the new speaker's corner or town center with the placard kind of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people do that, and they get really upset if they say some hateful and bigoted and harassing comments and things like that, and it gets banned. They get a ban, or the thing gets taken down, and they claim that they're being censored and they should have free speech. And I mean, the thing to come back is it is ultimately a privately owned business. So are you saying, Martin, that actually, forgetting the ones that exist, should there be one that is actually run by the government? Because that's the only way they could truly protect and give the free speech.
Well, that's a difficult one as well, because the government would then be controlling the algorithm, which would, I presume, mainly serve the status quo.
And
So,
let's face it, if it's government run, it would fucking suck.
Oh
So,
yeah,
Yeah.
No question from me there. It's just
yeah, but yeah,
how do we get there?
I don't think I'd be comfortable having the government be the one who decides who can use their platform too, because like we all live in one country. If the government can say we aren't allowed to speak on their platform, that sounds a bit iffy to me.
Yeah, they kind of do that in China at the
I
moment.
was going to say, it sounds like China, that does.
Yeah.
yeah, but the thing is that any regulations that you don't make the government do will be done by corporations in favor of corporations. That's always how it goes. And
Here's
then
another problem with some. Sorry, Martin.
that at least our governments are nominally democratically held responsible, whatever
That
fault
is
that may be, of course. But yeah, it seems to be the lesser evil.
that
considering-
is true, but the corporations can't arrest you for what you say yet.
Yeah.
No, they can arrest you, but there's evidence enough about seriously hurting you, for instance.
That is true. So, and I'm not sure I would want a social media with the force of the state behind it.
Mm-hmm.
No.
That's
Well,
my
I don't
main
think any of
concern
us
about
would
it.
actually want that.
I'm not on social media for exactly that reason. Not anymore, anyway.
I mean, here's another thing that you have to take into account with social media is that they aren't in any particular country. They're a platform that has to exist among several international places where the rules differ.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you even get that sort of thing within business. If you're dealing with another country, you not only have to adhere to your own country's laws, but their laws as well. And any differences you need to find like a balance between. And there are certain like deals that you can't put in place that would be fine to say, I don't know, say France that you maybe couldn't do with China and so on and so forth. So there are these different regulations in place, and social media obviously has to walk a tight line, especially with different countries. And I think that's why some countries just outright ban it, because it's easier than dealing with that sort of thing, or they have their own one like internal to their country.
Yeah, so we'd have to go for UN run social media then.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, a pretty big boon on their side is that apart from the more industrialized countries, other countries don't tend to have very strict regulations on these kinds of things, which also has led to a few genocides and/or coups throughout the world. And introducing
Myanmar.
places.
Yeah, Myanmar comes to mind. Yeah, pretty bad.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, no, I've just remembered something. We were going to say earlier as well, along the lines of the whole cancel culture thing. One that probably is less triggering because it's not necessarily a capitalist thing, Martin. But if a wife was to find her husband cheating, or the other way around, doesn't really matter, and they were to file for divorce, did the cheating partner get cancelled, or again, was it just the consequences of their action? And that was what I wanted to draw the attention to earlier. Some of the things that you do, it's consequences of your actions. It's the same sort of thing. Like if I forget like the hate speech in the work, if I go and punch my boss, I'm probably going to get fired. There's a lot of what gets labeled as cancel culture is actually people just having to deal with the consequences of things that they have said and done. And just because speech is free doesn't mean it's free from consequences. It means it's free from being arrested by the government. That doesn't mean it's free from other consequences that happen, around any of you. So people getting fired is just a consequence of what they've said, So
Consequence culture.
yeah, it generally is better labeled that way. I mean, there are some grotesque things that people do. There's a difference between someone going, I'm not gonna play J.K. Rowling's game or buy any of her books or watch any of their movies, or anything like that, and sending her death threats. Like there's a bit of a difference between those two things. One of them is like the consequences of her actions has meant that I'm not going to be a patron anymore, and the other one is actually being threatened towards her, which is probably not the way to go.
I think I got an example that we probably would all agree with, if I can go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
And so, if, for example, some guy works in a company and he's a pretty big transphobe, he goes around saying the T slur and stuff like that, and a bunch of trans folks report him to HR, and he gets fired for it. I think that'd be pretty analogous to what you were saying.
Yeah, it's the consequences of his actions, rather than being cancelled.
Yeah. Like, I don't think the trans folks would be comfortable working with someone who actively is out to say they're not who they say they are.
Oh, definitely. Again, it comes back to that safe working environment. Like, people aren't going to work in a place where they don't feel safe, unless there's obviously examples of people are in the army and they might have to go to war. They're not necessarily going to feel safe there, but you'd like to feel that the people that the army, that the side you're on, are supporting you and backing you up, and even then you want a internally safe work environment. don't you, Dave?
They know that when they sign up for the army, though. That's one of the reasons that they sign up. Whereas when you just go for working for a regular company, you don't sign up to be bullied.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, if you enlist, you
host-
expect to be
But
sent
yeah, the
away.
hostility comes from the opposite side, not from your own camp.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. Just it. Like, well, some of it comes from your own camp
Well,
through
yeah,
training,
I mean,
but
if
like,
you know the army, then yeah, it's
Yeah.
not quite that simple.
yeah. But I think, you know, for taking a charitable reading, taking what the intent of what we're saying, yes, I agree with you. Like, for the most part, on your own side, whether it's in the army or the company that you're working for, you expect, you know, that sort of safe working environment. You don't expect the harassment, the bullying, and all of that sort of thing. So,
The reframing of it as consequence culture kind of brings me back to what I said earlier about it being a propagandist term. If you label it as consequence culture, then you're admitting that it's happening because of your actions. Whereas if you refer to it as cancel culture, it frames the other side as being irrational and just wanting to get rid of you because they don't like what you're saying, rather than what you're saying having consequences.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it.
we have an example of that like 2 days ago here. A mayor just quit his job because his house was firebombed twice
Oh, wow.
by far right extremists who didn't want immigrants in the town. And I've seen a bunch of articles saying he quit, but not saying it was because of fascists, because it was of of the immigrants, or because the state didn't want to support his actions. So like it's a very big reframing of the situation. So
Yeah. Words have a lot of power when it comes to framing how people see any kind of situation. I know people say words are just words, but they're not. They actually they're able to paint pictures.
yeah, and that's where stochastic terrorism comes from again.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've got a good point there. I mean, I think even with you know, forms of therapy, sales techniques, or anything like that, the way you phrase something can change a person's response drastically. You know, you might always have some person that is always going to be angry no matter how you say X, but you could say the same thing in a number of different ways and get completely different responses from the same people. If you know,
You're so cool sounds very different to, oh yeah, you're so cool.
yeah, and that's just the inflection that you're putting on it.
Yeah.
So that's not even the words, really, is it? That's literally just
That's
the way it's
tone
said.
and
Yeah. So there is so much power in all of that. You could even say it with sincerity, but have a face like, "Oh yeah, you're so cool." You know, still sounded a little bit sarcastic. I kind of.
I get that a lot. A lot of things that I say sincerely, it doesn't come across that way.
No, I know what you mean. I often, unless I'm overly excited by something, I often get told that I'm sounding like I'm sarcastic, or that I'm speaking in a patronizing way, and I'm not intending to be that way. It's just
Maybe your reputation precedes you.
But yeah. So Luke actually has something to say on this. He says the ampant, I think that's supposed to say amount, the amount of psychology studies on this. He says it's also a very important point is limiting speech is not creating thought crimes. Words are actions, thoughts are not actions. Words exist out of your mind, thoughts don't. That's a really good point to make there, actually, because I think we've all been guilty of some of our thoughts. There are times when you've been incredibly frustrated with something and had a really negative thought about someone, and you wouldn't want to be arrested on that, because one, you might not even say anything about it, and two, you're not actually going and attacking that person. It's just because you're frustrated in the moment. So Luke is right. Words are actions, but I'd say they're generally softer actions. I think you should be beat over the head with a hammer versus actually beating you over the head with a hammer. But thinking it is obviously not even out there.
Words can change reality. Like, I marry you.
Yeah. That's true.
Does that change reality, though?
It does, yeah.
It
Because
changes the paper. It doesn't really change reality, though.
it kind of does, though. Yeah.
Yeah, tax allowances and all sorts.
Yeah, that's paper.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's all bullshit, but it's still part of reality. The reality that we've created for ourselves. So there is an
Some
effect.
words are actions within
Yeah, it's
themselves.
paper.
Yes. So
it's paper. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's why they have Paper Mario, because paper's still reality.
No, it's not. It's not. These are the same kinds. Well, no. Let's not go into a tangent. That's not.
I'm gonna get some paper aeroplanes and aim them all for your eye.
We're just making fun of Martin now. Poor boy. Well, I assume you're a boy.
Jury's out on that one. Hence the beard.
Oh, there are some fabulous non-binary folk with beards. Don't worry about it.
I did not know that. Anyway, let's go on.
Yeah, the limelight's on you right now.
I'm showing my ignorance real bad.
Okay, so I mean, I think we've sort of got a working understanding of free speech, cancel culture, consequence culture, and censorship. Now, I think we should probably bring it into the main topic of the night, especially as we've been talking for about an hour and a half already and not reached it.
Oh god, it's midnight already. And I work tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, we'll try and keep the last bit down to about half an hour, and really focus on, because I know Dave's got to go soon too. So there are. I mean, actually, Dave, you were a big part of what inspired this, the conversations that you were having with Reason to Doubt and other people around it. You made a couple of comments. So would you actually like to explain the situation? Because you'd do it better than I would anyway.
The conversation was basically about whether Nazis should be allowed to have a platform and be allowed to have free speech, et cetera, et cetera. And the argument was that no, nobody should be platforming Nazis. And one of the arguments is that, well, if only speech that promotes violence is to be banned, the whole Nazi platform is based on violence. It's based on genocide. So therefore, by platforming Nazis, you are platforming speech that encourages violence and genocide.
Can I just say that Nazis have been platformed before in the 1930s?
Yeah, we tried it once and it didn't go too
We
well.
saw how that worked.
Yeah.
and you can see in the Discord live chat, I've sent something about that too earlier, like the first thing I sent.
Oh yes, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, far right complaining about censorship reminds me of the Nazi. That is one of the things, though, that the far right parties do complain about censorship right up until the point where they get the power and they can censor everyone else.
Yeah, I've got into a lot of slanging matches with Nick Griffin, both online and out on like in real life. So,
but I think the original thing that you said was that led to this was that you probably weren't going to watch Modern Day Debates anymore.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Modern Day Debates has Richard Spencer on and people like Nick Fuentes. And I said that I wouldn't watch them anymore. And a bunch of atheists went absolutely apeshit saying that I was trying to ban free speech.
Yes, which even then, that isn't the case, because you're not even saying that they can't say it. You're just saying...
I just said I wouldn't watch it.
Yeah. It's the same way of... Sorry?
Behold, Emperor of the World, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If Dave isn't going to watch it, no one else is allowed to. That's a logical entailment, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, people would do better. Not meaning to brag or anything, but I'm kind of smart.
Yeah,
But
you don't need to platform fascists to
You
defend
don't.
their ideas. Yeah.
No, you
Yeah,
don't.
you don't. And that was one of the things that Reason to Doubt was arguing, was that by Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra going on modern day debates, while they actively encouraged neo-Nazis to come on, was tacit approval of neo-Nazi platforming. And to some degree, I kind of agree.
Yeah, this is what I was saying, like probably about an hour ago now, where when if a company was to stand by and allow their employees to make lots of bigoted and hateful comments, that's basically them passively accepting their behavior.
Well, the thing about Nazis is when you invite them on, they're not going to do all that. They're not going to say all these hateful and bigoted things. They're going to try to come across as the reasonable ones, so that they can draw people and say, well, maybe these people aren't so bad. And then they'll get invited into more private spaces like Stormfront.
4chan.
They groom you.
Yeah.
And they'll groom you, and you'll get stuck in that echo chamber like QAnon style echo chambers. And then those people become radicalized, and they get taught how to be public performing Nazis. And then you end up with what was the name of that place in America where the Nazis all marched?
Charlottesville.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually.
By the way,
Sorry, go for it.
speaking, there's a term for the Nazis speaking publicly and being like well presenting. It's called dog whistle.
Dog whistling, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Dave, we've actually had similar discussions about this sort of almost sales technique in the past, like that you see in politics and people who are trying to sell your products. I mean, David Wolf was one of the first people that we actually had this discussion on, was the fact that he posts a lot of like cool, nice, like carefree, kind of like little bit hippie but loving memes, and then he comes around, and once you start accepting him and you follow him and you go, what a cool guy, starts throwing out some anti-vax bullshit. We saw it with Britain's First, who were doing the same sort of thing.
If you're against people kicking puppies, join our page.
Yeah.
Oh, look, how bad are the immigrants? They're invading our country. And if you look at all the actual kind of dialogue that goes on, you see the same from Britain's First as you do from the people in America who are now saying, look at these 200,000 people marching towards our border. It's an actual invasion by another country. It's always the same terrible kind of propaganda.
And these people that are grooming people, ironically, have the same issue with the sex grooming gangs that they have in different places, and it's just you're not seeing this, are you? It's crazy.
Well, the reason that they choose that kind of language is because it distracts. Oh, you're calling us a groomer. Well, we'll point the finger over at them, and we'll say, well, we're not the groomers. Look at these people. And they kind of pick on that sort of paranoia. It's the satanic panic all over again, basically.
Funnily enough, most of the arrests for literal child grooming are from these people.
The right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it goes back to like the other day about your comment that got you banned from the Atheist Experience chat, Andy.
Yeah, I've again forgot what I've said. But I remember it being satire, and that was it.
Yes, you didn't even say it directly. You just get off the. Sorry, cat just jumped in.
I was pretending. I was putting myself and pretending to be a right wing religious person or something like that.
It was effectively methinks he doth protest too much. You didn't say that, but essentially that's what you were getting to, is obviously protesting so hard against homosexuals that maybe he's a closet case himself. You weren't saying anything negative. You were just saying actually a lot of the people who do tend to argue against this thing are because they do it themselves.
I mean, a lot of them are actually like a few politicians have been found watching gay or trans porn on their own. Like Nick Fuentes is a big meme about that. He's the far right cat boy, that kind of stuff. He's
So that's that. Yeah, whatever you do, don't say that in that group that I said it in, because you'll be cancelled as well.
Yeah. That also comes back to free speech, because on quite a few groups actually you can do ironic Nazist joke, but you can do feminist jokes, because if you speak about feminism it becomes politic, but speaking about Nazis is fine because it's not political. And that's actually a real thing that happens to me quite a few times.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest,
Nationalist
satire.
socialism.
Yeah,
nationalist socialism isn't politics. Okay.
Yeah,
And
I know, but I know what you mean by it being political, like within the group, and there are, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous how some things do sort of not get taken for the context that they're being framed in. Satire and sarcasm and stuff like that tends not to go down well unless you're actually saying it and people can get how you're saying it, or if someone knows you really well. I could probably tell if Andy sent me a text message and it was incredibly sarcastic. Whereas if someone who'd never met him before got the same message, might go, "What? How could you dare say that?" sort of thing. It's like, it's Andy. He's being a dick. Like, it's just, yeah.
Well, it's the same. I've shared Daily Mash articles this years ago on Facebook, and what was it? It was something like Grandpa Joe, from Willy Wonka and the show. Grandpa Joe arrested for disability fraud or something like that. And someone put, "Is this real? Are you real?"
People used to fall for the Onion as well as like, yes.
Well, the Onion's a similar sort of thing.
Yeah. But they're sometimes sharing those. It's quite funny seeing how many people buy into it. Though we did a similar sort of thing we tried some of our headlines on our articles, giving like very clickbaity headlines just to see how far into the article people will actually read. And we found that quite often people don't even read the first line of the article before actually responding. They just literally read the title and fly off the handle straight away. Headline culture, but that's a completely different topic. We're going way off topic. So anyway, Nazis. We're talking about the
fuck them.
Yeah. No, that might make more of them.
That's a clip, isn't it? So anyway,
I think that the point is that you're making there about platforming them is that they have quite good optics, and they will bring people in much in the way that Britain First and David Wolf and other places operate. They get people on their side first of all because they seem normal. I hate using that word, but I hope you can.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And it's not until you're already somewhat down the rabbit hole, you're stuck in a little bit of a sunk cost, that they might start throwing in some of the more bigoted stuff at you.
There's a really good, well, not really a show, but on YouTube there's a channel that did a series called The Alt-Right Playbook, and there's an episode called How to Radicalize an Army, which is actually on that topic exactly. I really recommend the alt-right playbook. It's really good.
Yeah, it sounds. I need to check that one out. Actually, you see, you're recommending me so many videos. You realise that you've already given me about a year's worth of watching with how slow I am at actually watching videos.
I will send you in DM the list, the full list.
That'd be helpful. That'd be helpful, and reminding me every couple of weeks as well. So that's one of the dangers of actually giving them a platform, is the fact that in their first instance they might not seem all that bad, yet from the knowledge of what Nazism is actually based upon, and it's not just white supremacy, it's actually a hell of a lot worse than that. You know that it's essentially someone identifying as a Nazi is basically accepting the Holocaust as, yeah, that's an okay thing to have happened.
No, it's worse if it didn't happen, but if it had, it would be good.
It would be a good thing.
Yeah. And we've actually seen some people say, yeah, well, not all Nazis believe in that sort of thing. And my question to them is, well, why would they identify as a Nazi then? Because if they don't believe in philosophies of Nazism, why would they even identify as that? Or are they just lying to you?
Yeah, not just that. People cosplaying as Nazis on the internet to try and look cool and try and be offensive. If you argue that, well, this proves that not all Nazis support Hitler and National Socialism, you're actually kind of committing a fallacy of equivocation. And I know that these kind of skeptics like to talk about not thinking in fallacies, because you're not actually speaking about Nazis. You're speaking about trolls.
Yes.
They're just being listed as a different identifier.
So yeah, either they're trolling or they're lying about the fact that they don't actually support that, because again, they're trying to have the good optics to then turn around later on, and say.
Also,
And I mean, if you think back to the 30s, the one thing that the Nazis were very accomplished at and had very good plans of was propaganda. They've been experts at this for a very long time.
yeah, Nazis tend to hide their power level, which is just the geekiest fucking thing they. Anyway, it shows you that they're all fucking losers, by the way. But anyway, any Nazi saying he's a Nazi is not a Nazi, unless it's a Nazi with power.
Or is very stupid.
Yeah, or he thinks he's behind closed doors. That's also a thing. But
yeah, I mean, I think there is more of an affinity for the term in somewhere like America with the neo-Nazis. They might actually straight up say that, even though Nazi was originally created as a sort of a derogatory term for the National Socialist Party.
It's why Churchill used it a lot.
Yeah. I think there are some that actually, I guess, have owned the label. Like, yeah, fuck it, I'm a Nazi. Like, I mean, ugh. But they're at least accepting that label. But the thing I still constantly come back to is the fact that there are people that defend people who are identifying as Nazis, saying, yeah, but they might not believe these things.
If you look at a video of Richard Spencer out in public, it's very different to the videos that have leaked of him that are behind closed doors.
Yeah, and that's the bit that I think people are missing. It's like, again, we're talking about slippery slopes, but it is not a fallacious slippery slope, because these are the things that do happen. This is what has happened. And if you are going to allow people to have a platform on your channel or whatever to essentially get round to spreading their message, and their message is one that is filled with so much hate and violence, then you are essentially saying that you have some acceptance for that. And any excuse you make that, oh no, well, they're not all like that, is absolute ridiculous, willful ignorance on your part. You're behaving irrationally, and you should actually consider what Nazism actually is, and don't use ridiculous arguments like that. Oh, well, yeah, language evolves. Remember that guy, Dave?
Yeah. Language does evolve, but not in that way.
Yeah.
It's a rigid rigid designator, the term Nazi.
Yes.
And who would want to change the meaning of the word Nazi anyway? It's like
Nazis who want to get in power.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Is it? No, they want to change the perception.
Yes.
Yeah. This goes back to headline things that you mentioned earlier. Nazis are great at knowing that headline culture prevails, where people don't look past the headline into the body of the article, and they take advantage of that. Somebody like Richard Spencer is the headline, and the body of the article is Stormfront.
Yeah, fair. That's a really good way to put it. So, Luke actually brought up another thing. Eugenics is supported by so many as well. Again, that's another good point. Luke also says, it's amazing how free speech is one way. You can insult me, but I can't tell you to shut your damn mouth. That does seem to be like that. But, oh yeah, imagine watching Avengers and thinking Hydra are the good guys. Yeah, that is...
Jordan Peterson actually started owning the Hydra comparison before he went crazy, like full-on brain damage crazy. The benzos really did a number on him.
I think I've only ever seen Jordan Peterson as that crazy guy.
Actually, it's a bit of a personal experience, but he was my introduction to the alt-right back in the day, like the proper alt-right. I used to watch like skeptic content back in the day too, so I kind of dipped my toes in that. I never went full Carlos film level, but I got a bit of experience with all that stuff too, and I know what it can do to someone who is in the position I was in at that time. So that's also why I like talking about that stuff.
So, I mean, from personal experience, you can actually navigate the fact that there are real harms that can and are caused by this sort of thing as well.
And hey, I'm out of it, so I know it's possible to de-radicalize an army too.
Yeah. But this is the other thing that popped up in the conversation as well. They said on the on Twitter that they thought that they could change a Nazi's mind with a rational debate.
No, that's not happening.
If they were rational, they wouldn't be Nazis.
You can change their mind, but you need a really big rock for that.
But yeah.
You'd have to ask yourself who's the real idiot in that situation, the Nazis or the people that think they can change their mind in a debate.
Yeah,
the Nazis have already won just by being allowed to have the discussion. Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, the way I think I see this from a numbers perspective. Let's just say you've got a big channel. We don't, but let's just say, you out there, you've got a big channel and you decide to allow Nazis on, right? Now you've got most people who watch you, probably really against, any forms of bigotry, especially Nazism, understand the whole thing. But maybe there's a couple of people in your audience that are a bit iffy. Maybe they are a little bit racist, or maybe they do have some white supremacist tendencies, shall we say. And they hear this person talking and they start going, oh, they don't seem that bad. You're not going to get any of their Nazi audience on your side from what you say, because they already are down this path of being a Nazi, right? But there's people who are perhaps maybe easily led, or perhaps slightly bigoted, or that might just start listening to them that little bit more, and that little bit more, and that little bit more, and then you end up in the more private conversations Dave was talking about earlier. And all of a sudden, they've got more power because they've got more people behind them. And that's just it. Platforming a Nazi has no positive effect. At best, it changes nothing. At worst, you've sent at least one person over to that camp. At least one. And depending on how big your channel is and the reach that you have, imagine if 10% of your audience go, I should check out another video of them. Let's say another 5% of those people go, check out a bit more. And that's part of the harm with giving them a platform, allowing them on your platform. Not only are you saying that actually, you're giving some form of acceptance to Nazism, but you're also giving them numbers. You're giving them people by allowing them on. And that's why deplatforming, especially with this sort of thing, does somewhat work. Dave, you actually had a good example of deplatforming in real life the other day through Nazi marches and stuff like that.
I can't remember.
I think you were talking about Nazi marches in the 80s and the way people reacted to
Oh,
them.
yeah. Because I was a skinhead in the 80s. You get a lot of the National Front people coming, and as soon as they walked into the bar, they would be kicked out. There would still be people that went off and joined them. You can't stop that. But it stopped the spread. I'll tell you what's a great film for this kind of thing is This Is England, the original one.
Yeah, I've not seen it.
Great film and a great soundtrack as well.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
Well, now you've just added something else to my watch list. That's a
Oh, it's
And the
it's
TV
definite. Yeah, the
series.
TV shows were brilliant as well. Really hard at the end.
Don't worry, I've added a lot more to your watch list.
I mean, American History X is also a good one for this kind of thing. But This Is England kind of describes the experience of how it was in the 80s, where Nazis would walk in and you would just immediately slap them in the face and send them on their way.
Yeah. And that sort of thing actually worked. It reduced the numbers. Saying, well, actually, no, that they could be all right. They're not starting anything here. Just let them in, let them have a drink.
They're all right at the end of a fist.
Yeah. Oh yes, Luke also brought up another one. They also said, this is the same person we were talking about, saying that they could debate a Nazi out of Nazism, that Luke shouldn't have a Ukrainian flag because he hates Nazis and there's Nazis there. So they side with Putin's genocidal war because Nazis exist in Ukraine. I mean, that's a complete like red herring, really, isn't it? Like he's trying to divert the conversation away from himself and the
That's
actual.
a bit of a non sequitur.
Well, yeah, it is.
Also, Putin is denazifying Russia because all the Nazis are dying in Ukraine. So,
But at the end of the day, having a flag because you're supporting Ukraine in a war, just because there's some Nazis there, doesn't mean you're supporting Nazis. There's probably some level of Nazis or some form of white supremacists or whatever in every country. But if you're trying to defend a country or support a country, just because there's a few bad people there doesn't mean that you're supporting the bad people. You're supporting the country.
like, having Nazis in post-Soviet state is pretty much inevitable. They hate the Russians much more than they hate the Nazis because, like, they lived under Soviet rule a lot longer than they lived under Russian Nazi invasion. So, yeah. Also, I wanted to add on the not platforming Nazis. I would add a caveat to that. It's platforming them, but to humiliate them. If you make
come to the
fun
freak
of,
show.
yeah, if you make fun of them, like in a debate, if you debunk them thoroughly, it works. If you also show them to be weak, actually, like their followers will usually, sometimes more than usually, they will sometimes start to doubt their strong boy who they saw as at his weakest. And one figure who used to do that pretty well, in my opinion, is Vosh, although he's a bit controversial, so I don't recommend you associate openly with him, because no one likes him in the online left. But he used to debate Nazis, but they've slipped too far into anti-empiricism, so he doesn't do that anymore. Back in 2020, maybe you could do that, but today, if someone's still a Nazi, they just don't care about what is real or not anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. Do any of you have anything else you'd like to add about platforming Nazis and the harms or anything like that? Or maybe anything that you've seen related to this recently? Dave, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, there is one platform that's suitable for Nazis, and it usually contains a noose.
I would say on the flip side, I'm not going to argue for Nazis, by the way. When I say flip side, labeling someone a Nazi when they're not.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, just because someone's a white supremacist doesn't mean they're a Nazi.
Well, this is it. I'm not defending Ben Shapiro in a way, but there's no way he can be a Nazi because he's Jewish.
Actually,
yeah,
Jewish Nazi, but yeah, he's pretty much the canary in the coal mine at this point. He knows he's working with people who, whenever they get the chance, will throw him under the bus. So
yeah,
he's in a bad position, but I don't think we have to be compassionate to him. He knows what's going on, so
he's voting for the leopards eating your face party, so eventually the leopards are going to eat his face.
Yeah.
And then he'll complain that they're cancelling him.
We had some guy here in the Netherlands during World War II as well. He was some kind of famous rabbi here. And after the war, they found out that he actually had ties with the SS, shipping his own congregants to Auschwitz. That's it. So it's not beyond the Nazis to work with Jews, to tolerate them, but to actually sort of embrace them until, of course, they discard them, like they always do. And, well, it's apparently also not beneath Ben Shapiro to have the other role, so...
yeah,
here he is very short.
I mean, I can't comment. I'm very short. I reckon I'm probably shorter than Shapiro.
Yesterday, Shapiro said Bernie Sanders was... what did he say exactly? I think he said Bernie Sanders was about as Jewish as a ham sandwich topped with shrimp on lard bread, which you can see the level of... Bernie Sanders' family was murdered in the Holocaust. So yeah, he has chosen his side, and I'm pretty sure his time will come, if it comes. Hopefully it will not come to that.
Yes, yeah, I was just going to say, hopefully it doesn't, even though he needs a bit of a comeuppance. I hope it doesn't get to that point.
Let's hope the canary doesn't die in that coal mine.
And if anyone's interested, he's 3 centimeters taller than me.
How tall is he?
He is 170 centimeters. That's 5'7" inches for our American viewers, who are probably the only people in the world. In fact, there's only 3 countries in the entire world that are not on the metric system.
We still measure height in feet and inches.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
No, old people do.
So
old people do. Like really old people who
yeah, we do. And stones.
No. No.
But,
I mean, Wales I
babies
can understand because
babies
they're
are still weighed
basically
in
in the
pounds as
past.
well.
They're not though. They're
We
not.
still measure height in sheep.
Our kids are all done in kilograms, and like Katie's family were like, "Well, what's that mean?" So I had to translate it for them. But yeah, so.
Yeah, there's a site called tunonretard.com, which is just it converts from retarded units to non-retarded units. So
yeah.
We do have portions of the metric system in this country, but we don't use it all the time at all.
We do mostly. Apart, we
if
don't.
If I go to a pub, I don't have a half a liter of beer.
No, you still have
Well,
a pint there.
you
No,
have a
that's true.
pint.
But then
Yeah,
shots are still 25.
Too.
Yeah, but in but a metric pint is literally half a liter, whereas a UK pint is 566 milliliters. Is it?
Something like that.
But an American pint is 463 milliliters or something like that, which is
Cheap
really
fuckers.
annoying. Yeah. You go out there, you ask for a pint, you're like, it's not even half a liter.
we have pints here too, but I don't think any French person knows it's actually a measurement unit.
Yeah, but I mean, so there are a few things, but like pub culture and stuff like that, and like our roads are still in miles per hour, but pretty much everything else has gone metric. There are some things that are dual, like milk. You'll go and buy 2.2 liters of milk, which is 4 pints or whatever it is. But that's obviously because of the changeover period, and some people aren't adjusted to it. A couple of generations down the line, I imagine they're not going to bother listing the pints on the milk and stuff like that. But let's not get into the whole metric system debate, because I could honestly get rant at Americans for hours on that one.
So wait a second. You have Brexit, but you're still going to go for the metric system?
I hope so. I really hope that they don't. I really like hope they stick with the metric system, because if they actually go back with that, I mean Brexit was a bad idea anyway.
Yeah.
But like even still, like there are. Oh no! Don't! No, I'm gonna get really angry and not even be able to talk. So Luke says miles per hour, Joe. I said, yeah. I did say that one as well, Luke.
I go put 60 liters in my petrol tank, but I measure how far it goes in miles per gallon.
Football field per moon landing.
Does America exist? That's one of the questions in the chat.
They made married with children, so yeah.
They're just arbitrary lines to divide us all.
That sounded like a Martin comment.
Imagine if
it does not exist. No.
Sorry, what did you say, Martin?
America does not exist. No.
No country
exists. A collection of individuals on a piece of land. That is what they
Imagine if we divided Europe and the Americas like we did the Middle East. That would be very funny, I think.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Luke has a question, so I guess we'll go round. He asks, what is everyone's line for free speech? What are the red lines? So what I suppose we can take from that, what are there any parts of speech that you personally think shouldn't be free? I'll go round and go, Martin.
Well, hate speech inciting violence, of course. I'm going to allow libel and slander because I did that just for the hell of it.
Just because it's funny.
Yeah, and because it's mainly money based, and because fuck money. What can we think of more? Terrorist threats, false bomb threats. I guess that's the same. And well, any kind of speech uttered in political circumstance that is a threat to the rule of law. And I know that is a very problematic way of putting things, and we will not be defining that. So, next.
Dave? Thank you for that, Martin.
mostly what Martin said, but I'll throw in as well what I said in the comments, that if your entire platform is built on violence and threats of genocide and enslavement, then that's a pretty clear red line.
Yeah.
Things like promoting child molestation, stuff like that should be banned. Calling for the overthrow of democracy in a credible way, I guess, would be another one, sort of a paradox of intolerance type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah, actually, I'm surprised we didn't mention the paradox of intolerance tonight. I mean, it's been mentioned in a roundabout way, but we didn't actually bring it up at all. But that doesn't matter. I'm sure everybody knows that, and if you don't, just look up the paradox of intolerance. Andy, where's your red line?
Yeah, I concur. Although I would include slander, maybe not libel too much, but I would include slander because it would be for reputation more than anything else for an
Not just
individual.
that.
So
If you call someone a child molester in a small village,
that's exactly what I was going to say. If someone calls you a child molester, then that's gonna follow you, even if it's not true or not. You know. So yeah, that's the only sort of thing that I'd say.
Yeah. And what about you, Vigdis?
I'm not very sure actually. I know what I don't like, but I don't know where I would draw the line because whatever line I can draw, usually people will find ways to get the message around it. Like dog whistle is a thing for a reason, and I don't know how we could include things like dog whistling, genocide, into this kind of let's say monitoring of speech.
Well, I mean, forget whether it can be monitored or not. Let's just presume for a second that whatever you say could be monitored. These are your rules. If they could be your rules that would actually stand the test of time on free
blue
speech.
sky, no logistics.
Yeah, exactly. Blue sky thinking. Well done. Thank you.
Well, in a world of perfectly spherical cows in a perfect vacuum, I'd say anything that threatens, that both threatens someone's identity. Like, I don't think transphobia, homophobia, and all that kind of stuff should be allowed. Anything that goes above that is a no-go, obviously. However, I think groups like corporations, like threatening corporations for the memes, let's say, I don't think that should be banned. That kind of things. Same thing for like overthrowing the government. I'm an anarchist, so obviously I don't like government in general, but which by the way, I don't know if you know about that, but anarchy and anomie have been successfully made the same thing, basically, which it's a long conversation, but I can explain that to you in DM. But because I'm an anarchist doesn't mean I don't believe in rules or laws. So calling for the overthrow of the government doesn't mean I want total chaos to me. So I don't think that should be included in that kind of things.
You're waiting to bow down to our AI overlords.
Oh no! I will be the first to be killed by both fascists and Skynet. No, a society run by AI sounds terrible.
Yeah, especially if it gets things as wrong as a lot of AIs do presently.
Yeah.
For me, I think I resemble a lot of the comments that have been made so far, but there is something else I think that I would really like to add into it. I think that in the same way that if you lie on your CV, you can get fired if you're found out about it. I think we should have the similar sort of thing in politics. If a politician is found out that they've lied to get power, boom, they're gone. They should be cancelled. Cancel the politicians, man. And it'd probably end up with pretty much all of them in existence actually being removed from power, and then hopefully giving more life to others. But yes,
But-
anything that instigates harm, violence, to others as well, like Dave mentioned with the whole like child pornography and things like that, that shouldn't be something that could be publicly said, yeah, come look at this, but yeah. Sorry, Andy, I cut you off there.
No, I was just going to say that will never happen because the people in power are paid to be there, or they,
Yeah, and their first duty is to only pass laws and things like that that will keep them in power. So they will never pass a law that would actually end up, them having to actually stand up and be honest and do what they say, because none of them would actually be in power. And I understand that, but we were going for blue sky thinking, not not necessarily.
Maybe
how
we
I see it.
should go back to direct democracy instead of representative democracy.
I don't know. Have you seen like the average intelligence of people in the country? I'm not sure that would work either. But then I don't want elitist democracy either. So yeah. I don't know. Maybe we should bow down to the AI overlords.
The problem
Yeah,
is the AI would be written by Musk.
Oh god.
That's the easy way out, honestly. Like,
yeah, I think
the-
death is the only way out. It's the only way we can escape all of this bullshit. That isn't
and
actually.
now nihilism.
And to combat that, absurdism. And if you,
I'm pretty sure the AI would go for painless universal genocide, honestly. Like, that would solve most problems.
yeah, get rid of the people. People cause the problems. People gone. No problems. Claire also chimes in. She says, "For me, it's causing harm. Anything that goes towards that line is where I start to hedge." And I think, yeah, yes, British pints are different from most other types of pints. You're correct. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying in the chat there, Dave, about your platform being based on enslaving or genocide. I'm behind in the chat, okay, Dave. Right, but actually, this is good for me. I'm only 10 minutes behind. Carrying on. I don't think there's any more in the chat. You mentioned representative democracies. Yes. So Nerdy Rodent also says, yes, there should be a much higher standard for people with much higher power, such as politicians. And this is the problem that, yes, I agree with you that there should be this higher standard. That's why I said what I said. But as has been pointed out, they're the people in power, so they're never going to pass anything that could potentially mean they're not going to get in power again. So yeah, well, I think that's been a really interesting conversation.
One question I did want to ask,
Oh,
or
yes.
I've just thought of,
Yeah.
is I'm not quite sure under which sort of line this would be, but several years ago, a Danish cartoonist published a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, I want to know where everyone stands around this, because, I mean, my personal view is, it. I is that I don't know. Is it allowed? I mean, for me, I think it should be. It's fine, obviously, because I don't follow that religion, and neither did the artist. But obviously, the people that found it offensive, that do follow that religion, that aren't allowed to view images of it. So it's a bit of a. That's why I was just interested in hearing other people's point of views on it.
Yeah, I think that's a tough line. I mean, I think the thing is, there are some people who are always going to get offended no matter what. Dave brought up a movie that was released in the 70s, I think it was. And
The Message.
yeah, and that was actually done very tastefully. Muhammad wasn't actually shown. And it was all done in accordance with one of the very strict groups at the time, to make sure that everything was in accordance with doctrine, you know, and there were still people who were protesting it.
Some of them even invaded a theater and threatened them with guns.
Which,
So it's kind of inciting violence, but in a in a response
in a poking
way.
the barrel kind of way.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a tough one. I mean, where is the line on that? Forgetting the situation about Mohammed just for now, but in general, is poking the barrel something that you say should be allowed under free speech, and how much? Because at what point does it become bullying and harassment? Is there a certain level? Because I think we'd agree that bullying shouldn't be something that is protected.
I still don't see that as bullying.
No, I don't either. But I'm just saying, where's the line? Because I'm saying that if it's kind of like teasing in a way, but you're not intentionally even teasing, but they're going to take it as teasing, right? Because it's something against their faith. But what I'm saying is there a level where, you know, banter among friends, you know, teasing each other and having a laugh, if said to someone that you didn't know, said in a certain way, could be bullying, right? But generally among friends, it's an accepted sort of thing that brings you closer together. If you're in the right friendship group, you're all on the same sort of path. So we'd obviously say that teasing is not necessarily a bad thing, because if it's done under a particular context, it's okay. But if it's done in a bullying sort of context at a school or work on, then of course it's wrong. So is there a line there? Where does it suddenly go from? Because this is actually actively teasing. So we say, okay, is that line between, if it's among friends, yeah, then it's okay. As long as all friends are on board with that. Like if a friend actually has a problem with it, then that's where it changes. It means they're getting upset by the teasing. They're not quite on board with the banter. So at that point, is that when there's a problem? Is that no longer speech that should be protected?
I mean, that would depend on the intent. Why are we doing that? Like, I don't know if you remember in the video I sent you from Is It Original, which I don't like anymore. I don't want to play with her anymore. She talks about a guy named Steve Shives. I did a bit of digging in his channel, and he made I think what is a pretty good point, which is we don't need to ban this type of expression, but what is the point of it? Like, I will not condemn what Charlie Hebdo did, because I think they were in their right to do what they did and didn't deserve to be shot for that. But we don't really need to make fun of the prophet, but we can. I don't think it should be banned in any way. If someone does it in bad faith just to attack the Muslim community, then yeah, I think it should at least be questioned why. And if they go, "Hey, it's just a joke, guys," then we can pretty much know they're disingenuous. But I don't think it should be
Oh yes,
banned.
the
Yeah.
just a joke defense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a
I
poor
agree with that
defense.
100%.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But I mean, and it is a poor defense. So there are times that among friends where something might be taken the wrong way, and it was like, I'm really sorry, I was just kidding with you. But then you've got that rapport where you can have that conversation, and I think again, it's the intent of it. You know, among friends, you'd hope that friends aren't there actually just to pull each other down and rip each other to shreds.
I think a good way to know is ask why the person who published that finds it funny. Like, if it's just haha Muslims, or haha Jews, or haha black people, then that I think it's safe to assume they're either racist or very, very stupid. But if there's a deeper intent, it might not be racism or stupidity.
I mean, well, there've been pictures of the Prophet Muhammad in South Park several times. Obviously, it's been known about, but I think it appeared twice before anyone knew. He was in the it was in the credits, I believe.
Before the 5 Super Friends things, I think he
that's
did
the
in there
one, yeah.
twice. Yeah,
And then
even in the first part of the 5 Super Friends.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and
episodes,
they didn't it didn't register until obviously there was a bit of a big ooh-ah about it, and then it just obviously all, for want of a better phrase, blew up. But yeah, but yeah.
See, I kind of think the South Park ones did it right.
They do most stuff right, if I was to be honest.
Yeah. But if I remember right, the Dutch cartoons were actually done in a kind of very Islamophobic and racist way. And it was sort of feeding off that sort of Islamophobia that was going on at the time. So I think
this
should it be banned? No, but should it be protested? Yes, but not obviously not in the way that, the people who killed the cartoonist did.
Yeah, the killings was Hebdo, wasn't it? It's in France.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, one of the Dutch cartoonists was killed as well.
Danish. Oh, Danish.
Danish. That's it. Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, that's an extreme response to that sort of thing, and that response probably isn't a measured response.
Yeah.
So
maybe burn the journalists or two, but don't kill people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, in general, though, I mean, if it was like the South Park episodes, like that sort of take on it is acceptable. I mean, I thought that was fine, but would you say in general that sort of take is okay?
I do. It's kind of like Victor says, intent counts for a lot.
When it comes to something that, as you say, is incredibly Islamophobic or whatever.
What is the punchline? Who is the punchline? Yeah. Where are you punching? Is it up, down?
Sideways.
And what sort of emotion is it intending to actually create in somebody?
Yeah. Is it something that is actually not only going to piss off the Muslims, but actually is going to get people going, aha, and giving more justification for more Islamophobia, more hate, more bigotry, for example? And if that's the case, then surely it's not going to be a positive thing either. If the intent is to try and stir up shit on both sides.
Yeah, for example, all the jokes about cops shooting black people in the US aren't meant to be making fun of black people. It's meant to be making fun of cops.
Police, yeah.
Yeah, and drawing attention to the problem as well. Like,
yeah,
there is that additional intent there. It's like, this is a serious problem. We need to do something about it. I might be making you laugh about this thing right now, but that doesn't negate the fact that there's a problem. It's just you're not listening any other way. And maybe if we make you laugh about it enough, it'll get in your head and you'll start thinking about it and you'll realize that there's a problem. Yeah. Nerdy Rodent also says that they think it's a tricky one because you could say it causes harm even though it shouldn't because it's only a cartoon. That it should be allowed under free speech because it falls under satire. But then, I think we do need to make fun of bad ideas. Is it Islamophobia if you're against the harm caused by Islamic beliefs? I mean, it's the actions that come from the beliefs that really, like, the belief in itself isn't necessarily the. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm trying to be even with what I'm saying here. But I think it's the fact of the content of the cartoon. Like Andy said, which way are you punching? We did a stream recently on, were we wrong to laugh? And it's talking about like the comedy, I even sent a clip the other day in our little chat, and it was a joke and someone was making a joke about like trans people, but he wasn't doing it in a transphobic way. Kristen often has the, imagine if you had Arnie as a trans Terminator sort of thing, and walk in that opening scene of Terminator 2, walks into the bar and goes, I need your clothes, your boobs, and your menstrual cycle. And that isn't punching down. It's a trans joke. There's no problem having that sort of joke. It's the fact that when you're using a joke to punch down, to make fun of, to belittle, to dehumanize a particular...
When you're treading on the downtrodden, you're punching down.
Exactly. So I don't actually know the content of the cartoon that you're speaking of, Andy. So I've got no reference as to what it was.
I think it was the one with Muhammad with the bomb as a turban.
Yeah, I don't think I even saw it then, Dave. But depending on the content of the cartoon and the intent of the cartoon, I think that's basically what we're saying is there's a line. If you compare maybe something like that to the way it was done in South Park, it's a very different take. There's still a little bit of, rib digging and all of that, but it is different. But yeah,
there's also the fact that usually it's more how to say it, it's more accepted when someone who is a member of a minority makes a joke about that minority, but it's not often intersectional. Like I'm thinking about recently Lil Nas X, the rapper. He made not really recently, but he made a joke about a picture of a woman who looked vaguely like him, and he said the surgery was a success as a joke about him transitioning, and he got dogpiled so much he ended up deleting the tweet. But for example, ContraPoint, who is a trans content creator here on YouTube, she did some of these jokes before she transitioned, and she also got a lot of shit for it. And when she announced she was trans, suddenly it became okay for her to do these kind of jokes, which I feel there's a bit of a problem here, but it's not the most urgent to address right now. But
yeah,
it's definitely something that should be talked about.
we did cover some of that off in the stream about comedy, and it obviously you can't control what people are going to take, but you do need to sort of know your audience. And there is generally more acceptance of making fun or having a joke at, even if you're not actually belittling, the group you're in. For it could come across transphobic if I was to make the same joke that a trans person could, because the audience don't necessarily know me, and what I said could sound like a bigoted comment, even though that wouldn't be my intent. And that is a big part of comedy. You need to know your audience, you need to build your rapport with them, you need to get them to understand your methods, your modes of speech. And then maybe you could make those kind of jokes with people fully aware that say that you support trans people and so on. And then these non-punching down, you still can't punch down. I don't think anyone should punch down. Maybe a bit of self-deprecation, but don't punch down. Don't necessarily come across in that way, and they can be a bit more acceptable. But again, know your audience. And yes, I agree that it can seem like a bit of a double standard, but when it comes to a marginalized group, they're already wound up and angry and have been shat on, and frankly, you can understand why they might have hairline triggers, because they're not as well accepted, and it can seem like anyone saying anything that isn't necessarily fully supportive, even though it's just a simple joke, can seem like that derogatory statement and an attack against them as, in their being. And from there, it's how we act about their offense that really, really matters. But anyway, I think though, as we've hit the midnight in the UK, it's 1 a.m. for you Europeans. And I know at least you have work tomorrow morning, so I think it's probably time to wind things in. I have had a thoroughly enjoyable conversation. We've
Yeah.
we've covered off a lot of content. We've gone over tons of information. So we started off with discussing things like free speech and censorship and cancel culture, consequence culture, and we ended up discussing Nazis, Nazism, and deplatforming and how deplatforming work and the dangers of actually giving Nazis a platform. And as we usually do, we went on a number of different tangents as well. But I had a really enjoyable conversation. Thank you all for being here. Do any of you have any projects or anything like now that you'd like the audience to know about, or any videos coming up on your channel, articles being released, or anything you'd like people to know?
I've got some more additions to the logic series I've been doing and the fallacy series, and I'm doing a couple of response videos. They should be out next week.
Awesome. Well, that's at Trolley Dave. There's obviously links in the comments already, or the description, should I say. So head on over to Dave's channel and give him a subscribe if you haven't already. Do any of you others have anything you'd like to say before we go?
I'm still on Twitter, and I probably post more thing on YouTube, but I only post gameplay, so unless you're into that, I don't recommend.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description as well to your channel. It's not there at the moment because obviously it was a later decision, but I will give a link to your channel and to your Twitter page.
You can just put my Twitter, my YouTube isn't. It's a work in progress. So
well, hey, works in progress is how it all starts. The more people that can get over the now can be there. I was there at the start, man. So it'd be good for you. Plus, you'll also get a few people giving you that feedback that can sometimes be incredibly helpful. So yeah, thank you everybody who has watched tonight, and anyone catching the reruns, obviously. Been fantastic to have you all here, and thank you each and every one of you for joining us on stream. It's been thoroughly enjoyable, and I know it's been a bit of a long one again, but I do think this is a topic that does need that sort of length going into it. So hopefully you have all enjoyed it and stayed with us, stayed the course for the entire stream. But I will do my best to cut some highlights out of it as well, so that those who have attention spans as short as mine can actually pick up on a few important tidbits of information. Other than that, all I've got to say is that make sure you check out the recent streams that we did with Andy and Kristen, and they're on the YouTube channel now. They should be in the SciPh playlist or the live and schedule playlist. Hope you all have a fantastic one, and we will catch you soon. Have a good night, all.